Welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. I'm John, your host. You guys are the guests with the most. And today's topic, or this video's topic rather, has to do with a broadcast, another program. It was Steve Quayle on USA Watchdog, and I believe that came out Friday and got a lot of attention over the weekend. As a result, I got a lot of attention over the weekend on the subject. Now, as you guys know, I have a peculiar sense of humor, and it stems from when I was born with an abnormally large funny bone, the doctors noticed. And they didn't attempt to correct it, so here I am. Anyways, the subject of the video that Steve Quayle talked about had to do with a chance of a 500-foot tsunami developing from seismic activity off of the west coast of the United States. Up north, from Northern California up through Oregon and Washington through the Cascade Range. Now, many of you know that I live in Northern California. Now, if you listen to Shaquille O'Neal, he'll tell you that the Earth is flat. And so if you look at a flat Earth model, Northern California is actually bigger than Texas and twice as big as Alaska. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint exactly where I'm at, but I like to keep it general. There's a funny bone again. Anyways, I got a lot of emails private, and the video that I did was very popular a few weeks ago when I talked about the potential of an earthquake causing the New Madrid collapse and possibly causing the Central Valley of California to collapse and then submerge. And it's a wild-haired theory I have, just something to think about. It was a fun video to do. But I've been getting hints and clues from a good friend, John in Fremont, who's been talking about earthquakes as well as seismic activity out here on the West Coast. He's been telling me for years, and more particularly in the last couple of years. So this information coming from Steve Quayle didn't surprise me, but I thought I would give some commentary on it. I am, in the event of a major explosion from Mount Lassen or Shasta, if they blew like Krakatoa, I'm sure I would hear it in my location. But according to Steve Quayle, there's a lot of seismic activity going on. According to many experts, there's a lot of seismic activity going on, magma pools forming, volcanic activity developing. I'm of the opinion at this stage of life that I don't need to get too worried about every little thing that comes up. I recognize that things are going on, and I also recognize that, like climate change, heating or cooling of the atmosphere, growing and receding of glaciers and ice caps on the poles, that the Earth also groans and swells and contracts. For example, in the South Pacific, islands just pop up. Same with the Indian Ocean. They'll just pop out of the frickin' ocean. Right? A friend of mine who is an islander told me about a nice little island popped up by his chain of islands. He said, hey, great, we got another island, And in another part of the Pacific, central with relation to east-west, very close to the equator, not Hawaii, but south of there, there's some atoll-type islands, very, very, just barely above sea level, and they're starting to go underwater. Now, of course, it is a tragedy. It's not funny, and the people there, their island is being slowly affected by this rising sea level. But maybe it's not a rising sea level. Maybe like those islands that pop out of Palau, maybe this island, as that one popped up, is going down a few inches here and there. The Earth expands and contracts, just like Yellowstone. Yellowstone has seen some incredible seismic activity increases in other types of activity, geyser activity, and it has actually has some swell points where there was once a lake, it's kind of lifted. And so I've applied this over the last couple of decades, thinking of seismic activity, volcanic activity, just because things are moving in a particular direction. Maybe this is as far as California is going to go as far as activity and magma action, and then it's going to go back the other way again. These trends don't last thousands of years typically, right? We've seen the little warming period back 1,000 years ago when they were growing grapes in England, and Greenland was actually green and not covered in ice. And then we saw shortly after that what became known as the mini ice age, which didn't really subside, I guess, officially. Well, as long as it's continuing to get warmer, that's where it officially, ended. So we go now, what was so hard about colonizing America? It's not a bad place. Well, 500 years ago, guess what? It was a cold mofo because it was a mini ice age. Winters were much colder, harsher, and longer, and growing seasons were much more difficult. That's why the original settlers, as hardy as they were, had a hell of a hard time, and many colonists died, and even some colonies like Roanoke died off, just disappeared. Probably weather related. I don't blame the natives, even though the native population probably had good reason to want to stomp out, colonists. They're strange looking. They talked funny. They dressed in funny clothes, and they had funny habits. Right? They were a different social construct entirely from the Native American construct. Still, back to the West Coast. The Steve Quayle video with USA Watchdog was very alarmist. Steve has always been a big bell ringer. He is entertaining. He's informative. I've been listening to Steve Quayle since the 90s. I recall, before my first son was born, buying his book, Genesis 6 Giants, because of my religious historical studies at the time regarding, everything. Everything historical, everything astronomical, everything biblical. It was all fun to kind of see how it all tied together. I was putting a lot of concepts back then together. As I said, I've been interested in educating myself and educating others for decades and decades and decades. So I got Stephen Quayle back then, and he was very alarmist back then. These giants, they're going to do DNA tests, and they're going to figure out DNA, and they're going to clone them, and they're going to come back and kill us all. And then I was like, I was just between 25 and 30 years old at the time. A little more subject to fear porn. But, apart from that, Stephen Quayle is an excellent source for information. Not the source, but a source. And it's one of the things I've been trying to do with my channel as we get closer to Shit Hitting the Fan. I want to try and pull back and temper myself even more. Try and keep things light while discussing heavy topics. To become aware and prepare, but not exist in perpetual fear. Take action, but don't put yourself in a position where you hurt yourself. We need to take action. We need to prepare food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense, and a plan, right? And I always got to put that in somewhere in a video, and I got it in well before the end this time. I originally moved to the vast territory of Northern California approximately 16 years ago. I transplanted myself, my wife, my kids, and sold my real estate down by Sacramento area and moved up here because I wanted to get away from major thoroughfares, that is highways, away from major military installations, major population centers, and I wanted to get out of the downwind of the Bay Area and Sacramento in Stockton in the event of a nuclear, biological, or chemical attack. Right? It was a shit it's the fan move, and I wanted to raise my sons. I wanted my wife and I to raise our sons in an environment that was less urban, more rural, have more of a small town feel. Certainly the idea was to get away from crime, drugs, gangs, and other various types of assholes. And I succeeded largely in doing that. Unbeknownst to me at the time, but knownst to me now, right? The volcanoes in the area, on the southern end is Lassen and Shasta. And these volcanoes, this volcano chain in the Cascades, goes all the way up to close to Seattle. We got Rainier and Hood and many others. Mount St. Helens, of course, blew when I was a kid in school. Watched that one. If we didn't watch it on TV, we watched, the news broadcast because it was a significant event at the time. And that was when I lived back down as a kid by Sacramento. So we've known that this chain isn't dead. In fact, Mount Lassen, I believe, blew in 1917. Again, that one is a hop, skip, jump, and a short flight from where I'm at. And I've heard theories, because no one was around at that time, that the Dark Ages was caused by Mount Lassen. If you look at it, you can see how it was a significant mountain, like very much like Shasta. It's got a big peak and a little peak, but if you look at those peaks and you build it to the top, it's an enormous mountain that's not there anymore. It was blown into the sky and darkened the sky, and the earth cooled for many years and made civilization difficult to sustain, and yada, yada, yada. Theories, right? Yada, yada, yada. Science information. Yada, 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 and a lot of yada. Now, Stephen Quayle is correct when he says, look, the government will not tell you what's going on. Stephen Quayle is correct in saying, yes, the government is more than likely studying it with seismic equipment, on-site geologists, volcanologists. They're probably flying over using technology based out of aircraft. He specifically said U-2s. I don't know where he gets his information, and I don't really care to research too much. Whether it's a U-2, a C-130, an F-16, that's towing a flag, I don't care what they use. That's not important to me. What's important is the quality of the information. And so apparently Steve Quayle is producing, filming, and going to release a movie that should be out next spring. I don't know if it's going to be a major motion picture, a privately funded documentary. I'm just not too sure, right? But it'll be about this particular thing that's going on. And so in light of this video, people are concerned about me in my area. And I'm concerned about everyone else who's in Northern California, moving all the way up to Seattle. Apparently, if Rainier gets hot or blows, there's going to be mudslides and flows that are going to inundate Seattle. That would really put a damp on the coffee market. So yeah, if that thing blows, buy coffee stocks. Get a coffee ETF. Better yet, I prefer physical, buy coffee beans. Once again, peculiar sense of humor and jokiness on a serious topic. Once again, I want to keep it light, but talk about this subject that is really important. What do you do? This harkens back to other videos. Where can you live in this country, in this world, to get away from all of the risks and threats? Right? If you live on the coast, you've got these San Juan de Fulca, or the Juan de Fulca fault, which is offshore. Supposedly, there's the crust, and the other crust is sliding under, and that's going to lift up the land, right, where the volcanoes are, and it's causing all kinds of problems. But we could end up with tsunamis. And he says 500-foot tsunami. Where I'm at now, there is no effing way a 500-foot or even a mile-high wall of water could get to me. Just too damn high and too damn far away from the San Juan de Fulca. It would have to travel and fill. One wave does not make an ocean. It's a wave. An ocean is an ocean. So this idea that one wave can take out the entire western United States, I don't buy. Steve goes on to say that everything west of I-5, which is a north-south interstate highway, everything west of it, I wasn't sure if he was saying it's going to get wet, it's going to be uninhabitable, it's going to lose its infrastructure, or it's going to sink and break into the ocean. I'm not sure what he was really getting at, or maybe the potential for all those things. You know, hearkening back to Fukushima, which was well documented as far as the damage that was done to the country because of that earthquake that caused a tsunami. You know, the world gets scared easily. When Fukushima hit, it had an effect on Hawaii. It pulled a lot of water out of Lahaina. I saw some footage of Lahaina Harbor, which is on the southwest side of Maui. Right, it just pulled the water out, and then the water came back in, but it did not flood everything. Right, there was a lot of fear, though. A lot of fear. Some waves hit North Shore and Oahu and Molokai and Maui and the Big Island, of course, and also Kauai. I don't want to leave Kauai out, but it didn't destroy Hawaii. Now, back in apparently, well, back 100 years ago or so, maybe it wasn't 100, maybe it was 70. A big tsunami came from the United States somewhere and slapped Hilo, which is on the east side of the Big Island of Hawaii, and did a lot of damage, killed a lot of people. So they built a seawall up to stop that. So water sloshes around, but a tremendous earthquake. I mean, the Fukushima earthquake was enormous. But the water, by the time it made it to California, was a 1 3-foot wave. That was it. And it was a 3-foot, kind of like a surge wave, and that was it. So I can't imagine the size of the wave it would take, you know, to disrupt the entire world. Because it's kind of like air. You can blow a bomb up, and the blast wave very close is going to be strong. But as you get further and further away, it exponentially dies off because the energy can expand in 3 dimensions. Now with water, it expands in 2 dimensions along a flat plane, because water doesn't just go up in the air the way energy does from a bomb, but it does travel out. Even though it's not going in 3 dimensions, it's only being expanded in 2 dimensions. There's a little more energy sent through water. And because water is tightly packed, unlike air, it doesn't have as much compression room. As a result, a wave can be started, you know, a tsunami wave, and it can go a long ways. But like an explosion, a bomb, it dissipates over distance. Right? A tsunami wave has to hit 1 million or more little waves the whole way, plus currents, plus wind, etc., etc. So that's why, you know, a 50-foot wave in Japan was only a 3-foot wave over in California. It doesn't make it less destructive or less important. It just to give us an idea and understanding, you know, what we're dealing with. The other volcanoes that are active on the south of the equator and on the west side of the Pacific, you know, we've got a bunch of volcanoes over there that are continuing to erupt. We've got, I think Vanuatu is a continuously erupting volcano. And the island, Big Island of Hawaii had a volcanic eruption, was it a year ago or so? Maybe 2 years? A little tired still. So they're continually erupting. We shouldn't be surprised. And we never know when we're going to get the big one. And Steve Quayle likes to talk about the big one. Unlike human behavior, which is very predictable and runs along known courses of thought and behavior, geological processes are not as easy to predict, obviously. And we don't know when something needs to let off more energy or when it's let off enough. We don't know when islands are going to rise or sink based on, think of it as your stomach. You're laying on your back, you just had a huge dinner, and you start getting gas rumblings. You can hear them, right? And you can see your stomach rise and fall as the air bubbles move around, and every now and then you get an explosion. You know what I mean? right? You're going to let off some steam, Bennett, right? You're going to let off a little gas. That's what a volcano is it's an off-gassing. And yeah, a lot of those gases are toxic, right? What can you do? Nothing. I think it's sulfur dioxide, sulfurous compounds. Anyways, what we've got though is we have an example where, yeah, Hawaii, it erupted. It's erupted many times and it'll continue to erupt. It's a developing island, but it's not the end of the world. And it subsided. And other volcanoes have blown, and they don't continuously blow, but yeah, they can change radically change the environment. They can cause radical problems. Will one volcano blowing out here on the West Coast, will that satisfy the Earth's need to let off some steam? Or will it take 2 or 3? But, alarmists would have you believe they're all going to go, plus the plate shift on the Juan de Fuca thing, and bam, the world's going to end. That's worst case scenario, as far as I'm concerned. I don't expect that. We don't have a whole lot of precedent in geological history, understanding of an entire chain of volcanoes blowing terminally all at once. You just don't have that. What processes are needed, I don't know. I don't want to minimize the understanding of what's going on, but it's fascinating to me that the smarter we get with our ability, or maybe the more informed we get, because a lot of times I question how smart people are, but the more information we collect, we realize the universe is a very dangerous place. It used to be when I was, 20 years ago, when I was studying astronomy, our local astronomy, what happened in our solar system, some theories there. The idea of planet killers like the KT boundary event, which was the death of the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, was caused by an asteroid that was 10 miles or 10 kilometers wide, hitting what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, which back then sunk, but apparently it's risen back up. More of that stuff, right? More crustal moving of continents, thrusting and diverging. We've got a lot more of those asteroids, these planet killers out there that are 10 kilometers, 100 kilometers. They called them near-Earth objects, right? And they couldn't find them, and now they're able to find them using advanced sciences. So they're finding more advanced sciences, and they're letting us know when meteors come by, and we get these fireballs in the sky. It's great stuff. It's very fascinating, but it doesn't mean the end of the world. So when they get more information and they're learning more about what's going on under the first couple of miles of our crust here, it doesn't mean that because they've made new discoveries about things that have pre-existed for hundreds, thousands, millions of years maybe, right? Place has been here a while at least. Just because they're discovering new things doesn't mean we need to be alarmist. The same way they discovered that Yellowstone is a massive supervolcano and it's overdue to blast. To go, bam. Is their science accurate? Do we need to panic? No. We do need to have a plan. That last thing I always mention, having a plan. So if we're here on the West Coast, you're here on the West Coast. If you're inland, if you're in Idaho or Montana or Colorado, Utah, and you think you could be adversely affected by a volcanic eruption, explosion out here, then you just need to have a plan. Hopefully, and with the advances in science, we ought to be able to get an indication that something's going to happen. And you would evacuate early, right? And evacuate a much further distance than you would anticipate you need to go. Right? If you're in Seattle and you've got family up in Canada, maybe moving north temporarily would be a good idea. Always, as a prepper, the idea is to beat the crowd. To get ahead of the crowd. That's why we have food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, right? You got to have those things ahead of time, right? So preparing and planning is to put yourself in a position where you survive an SHTF incident. And believe me, a volcano going off in your general neighborhood, that's shit hitting the fan, right? That's a big deal. But I'm not going to change my life, right? I'm not going to panic, rather. I may change my life. Right in the spring, my second kid goes off to college, and who knows what I'm going to do? Who knows? I don't know. Shoot, I mean, something could change next week, but right now I'm planted firmly right here, and I have no, not packing boxes, not running for the hills. I'm already in some hills. Not running for the valleys, not running for the desert. No, none of that stuff. But it is good to be aware, and it is definitely advisable to be prepared. Don't panic. Take the information in. Continually reassess where we're at. Right? And it's kind of funny, I guess. I'm the prepper guy saying, hey, you need to be ready. Stuff's coming. Shit hits the fan. And here I am talking down what Steve Quayle is talking up. And I probably am doing so because he tends to be very sensational. Like I said, he is very entertaining and he's very convincing. And Steve is an incredibly intelligent man and has been around a long time doing what he's doing. Long time. I just am not going to panic over this. But I do appreciate all of the concern, care, comments, suggestions, and information that have made it my way. It's always surprising how many of you folks have managed to contact me in a personal way. In many different ways. I don't want to describe them because I don't want to promote the idea that I want more of it. I don't want to promote the idea that I think it's okay. Right? I like to keep my location a little bit private for a lot of different reasons. Mainly because I am I enjoy my solitude. This is my fortress of solitude. Much the way Superman has his fortress of solitude. I like to keep a low profile, as it were. I enjoy privacy and it's just how I am. But I do appreciate everyone's concern. I really do. I also appreciate the fact that everyone, or not everyone, but many people have continued on Patreon as sponsors, have raised the amount of money they've sponsored to our show. I don't know if it's because I said, hey, look, it only costs 7 cents a day. People maybe they figured they could afford more than that, and they have, and it's wonderful. Additionally, PayPal donations have been very helpful and useful in our efforts here. Quite often we do equipment upgrades, new equipment. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on, even though it just appears like you're in my living room with me. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes between Jolie and I and the R Syndicate and others. And so all of your help is much appreciated and is put to good use in our lives and in our efforts. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So thank you again. And once again, to conclude this video, I would recommend everybody not panic. Right? Even if we get a stock market crash, don't panic. Get some riots in some cities, don't panic. Get a nuclear bomb go off somewhere, panic a little bit, right? But understand that having a plan, having all that you need for prepping to get you by, whether it's get you by a week, a month, a year, whatever your number is that you're at or that is your goal for how long you can survive if things go down. Realize and remember that having that and a plan puts you in a position where you don't have to panic. You don't have to run around like your hair's on fire, screaming like a little girl, and then running down to the bank to pull cash out and try and get stuff at the store, and you're fighting like it's Black Friday times 10, trying to get food and stuff. Having a plan puts you in a position where you don't have to panic. Don't have to panic. I've enjoyed the Prepared Mind shorts. I want to do another SHTF at the movies. I've got a lot of great plans for the future of the channel to both inform and entertain without causing people to panic. But I must say, I do want to light a fire under everyone's ass. That is my intent. And getting people to think about where they're at and where things could be is my intent. And taking strange positions and talking about different or difficult subjects. Right? I want people to stretch their mind. I want them to to feel uncomfortable a little bit. So I do that with my language. I'll talk about religion or race or political things. And I want people to get used to being uncomfortable because things are getting more uncomfortable. Like, I notice it, and I genuinely notice the discomfort after spending several days trying to learn about millennials from their perspective. Ouch. I don't know if it's youth or what, but good God, it's difficult to talk to those people. But I understand more about them. Anyways, putting ourselves in an uncomfortable zone trains us, prepares us, helps us understand and deal with what is coming. And right now, socially, we're seeing a nice slow move into shit hits the fan. But things like a volcano would be a regional shit hits the fan. Things like riots are SHTF hotspots, right? And general political, what word can I use here? Chicanery, assholery, that stuff in Washington, right? That can explode like a volcano in chaos, especially if there's an assassination of high political figures or a physical coup or large civil unrest on the streets. That can cause some serious stuff. So being prepared now, and then also being mentally prepared by having a plan and being a little conditioned to some harsher stuff, right? In other words, we need to thicken our skin a little bit. Right? Need to not be so offended at everything. And I catch myself being offended from time to time. I do. I'm like, that fucker pissed me off. Why? Guy's an idiot. Chick's a dumbass. What do I care? Right? But conditioning ourselves, get offended a little. That's what we try and do here. Get you to think. Put you in a scenario or a frame of mind where you're offended a little. And then see how you handle it. What's your response? It's all good planning, it's all good practice, and it's all good because chance favors the prepared mind is yours. I'll talk to you soon.